going to start everyone off with a question and then go panelist by panelist. And the framing first question is, how has your own identity influenced your perspective on belonging? And I'm going to start with Dan.
Thanks, Elsie. Hey guys, lovely to meet you all. I want to first of all say I have learned so much over the last couple of days. You guys are all doing such incredible things, and I've never felt like more of an imposter. But in the spirit of belonging, I'm going to just sit here and claim my space, and thank you all for being so welcoming to me. The first thing I wanted to say was I loved what Kim said the other day around faith and belonging. I'm not sure if Kim is around right now, but I can't wait to read your book on that, Kim, if you can hear me somewhere. Despite the fact that I am not religious, however, I do pray to a church, but my church is the pop divas, obviously. Taylor Swift, Lady Gaga, Chapel Rowan, Dua Lipa, I could go on. And the reason why I bring that up is because I was listening to a song last night on my walk back, Pink Pony Club by Chapel Rowan. And I listened to it and I heard words in a different context than I have before when I've listened to it the other 4,000 times. So I'm just going to read out what the words were. It was, I heard that there's a special place where boys and girls can be queens every single day. It's where I belong, down at the Pink Pony Club. So this really resonated for me and my identity for lots of different reasons. I grew up in Glasgow, in a rough area of Glasgow in Scotland, where no one was gay. I didn't know any gay people. And the only time I ever heard the word gay was when it was being used as a slur against me. So that created a lot of fear. I experienced a lot of homophobia, hate crime, which was quite prevalent in Scotland at that time. And I just didn't feel like I belonged. And I don't know, it was a very tough time in my life, you know. However, there is a plot twist. My life did really change because I basically spent my younger years fighting to escape the world that I was in. I was able to then move to London, to the big city where all the other gays were. And then, wait for this, I went on a gay dating show on TV, which then put me in a whole other world of a community. And all of a sudden, the community that I had been striving and searching for so long, I found myself at the heart of. And I was like, this is such a strange turn of events, but this is all my Christmases have come at once. This is exactly what I always wanted. And I think since then, and that's why I would call myself an activist, because since then I have sort of made it my life's work to continue to be a voice for the community that I felt so long I couldn't be a part of. And now that I've found that, I want everyone else that is like me to find that community as well. So since being on the gay dating show, I went on to do lots of other stuff. So I did work within HIV space, sexual health, drug safety, hate crime policy, working with amazing charities around the world, Stonewall, Turn Siggins Trust, and essentially have used my platform in a hope, a positive way for my community. And the reason why I tell that story like that is because it shows where I started, really searching for belonging, to where I am now. I've found that belonging within my community, and I believe that now I've found my belonging, it's my duty to make sure that other people can find that too.
Thank you, Dan. That's really well said. Dan had told me that his intro would be a surprise, and so I'm glad the surprise included the Pink Pony Club. Victoria, you've shared that through your work, you've learned that volunteering is empowering. Can you tell us more about your work and Serve the City?
Okay, so I just want to actually also say what Dan just said. Thank you so much to Kim and to the Belonging Forum to let me speak. I'm just a volunteer. I'm not an expert. I'm not an academic. I'm just a person who wants to do what I can for my community. So I'm not really a public speaker either, so if you don't mind, I've actually written something. I do apologise, but hopefully I will be quick and fluent. But, this is my story. So a few years ago, around COVID, well, actually before COVID, I'd been thinking about volunteering for a while. But at the time, I had a small bakery business to run. I had kids at school. My husband was had a very busy job. And on top of which, neither my husband nor I come from Belgium, which is where we live. So there was no extended family around me to support me if I wanted to do extra things outside of my own work. But there came a point in my life where several family crises coalesced. My mother, who was in England at the time and suffered dementia, died during COVID in a care home. And I was unable to see her. I was only able to see her once in the 2 years before she died, by which time she didn't recognize me. 2 months later, my daughter had just started university and she was drugged and sexually assaulted by another student at the university on her first night. My son was struggling at school with bullying and ADHD, and I was forced to close my business that I'd spent 10 years building up. To say I was overwhelmed is an understatement. I was grieving for my mother's death while desperately trying to support my daughter and fighting for my son to be allowed to move school. My husband was back at work, more or less full time. And so I was just sitting at home with my grief and my anxiety with no one to talk to. Around about that time, I heard through a friend about a food distribution project that was being run from the basement of a church in the centre of Brussels. I'd been running my small bakery, as I said, for several years before COVID. And so I thought that this was a way to use my skills and maybe achieve something positive while I was thinking about what I was going to do with my life, and frankly, to take my mind off things. I went online and I discovered that I, in fact, could volunteer for this project using an app called Serve Now, which is a platform run by a volunteer organisation called Serve the City. I started off just volunteering for an hour. That was all I could manage at the time. I portioned food with some 20 other volunteers. And we packed the food into large heat-proof boxes, which were then distributed by other Serve the City volunteers to various food distribution projects around Brussels. That first day, I helped portion about 600 meals. The next day, I went back and I started preparing those meals. After a while, I decided I wanted to see where the meals were going. So I volunteered again for yet another Serve the City project, which had been started by Mahmoud, himself a refugee from Syria, who'd been distributing food to people living in a tent city, mainly occupied by asylum seekers, that had grown up in one of the city parks in Brussels during COVID. Then after a few months of going regularly, they asked me if I wanted to lead a project. I couldn't believe it. If I wanted to join Mahmoud and help lead the project. So now, my friend and my colleague, Mahmoud, and I oversee the distribution of volunteers of the preparation of food, around 2,000 lunches every week in a humanitarian centre in Brussels called The Hub. Not only that, Serve the City has given me the courage and the support to start another small project, leading a team of volunteers visiting the residents of an old people's home for people with learning disabilities. It has been the honour of my life, and I can't thank them enough.
Thank you so much, Victoria. And I will say, you said that you were just a volunteer, but I don't know if anyone's just a volunteer. I think we can use volunteer in a positive way, but I think you're a lot more than that too.
Thank you.
And I'm going to turn to you. And you're a self-advocate that does great work with the Harvard Law School Project on Disability. And can you please share us your thoughts about your identity, what that means for you?
So, for me, acceptance is a great part of belonging. Many people with intellectual developmental disabilities don't feel accepted. Although self-advocacy is a civil rights movement, it's also a belonging movement.
Thank you.
And it's also really important to feel accepted, otherwise you're not part of the community.
Exactly. Thank you, Anne. You said that so well. Bridget, you have such a strong background in research, and you told me that part of your identity is that of a research. Could you explain that a bit more for all of us?
Yeah, I think we all have multiple identities. And when I was thinking of the question that you were going to ask about my perspective on belonging, I wanted to talk about my identity as a researcher. I work for Human Rights Watch, and I research the rights of older people. So I investigate and document the violations of rights of older people. And I was in South Korea a couple of weeks ago, in Incheon, which some of you may know, it's the city next to Seoul where the international airport is. And I met an 87-year-old woman who every day goes out and picks through the rubbish and the litter and the garbage cans on the street to collect recycling materials. So she collects cardboard boxes, plastic bottles, tin cans, anything that she can then sell to a recycling depot, and for 50 Korean won per kilo. If you want to translate that into Canadian dollars, she would have to collect, and I will check that I've got the math right, she would have to collect 20 kilos of recycling to earn 1 Canadian dollar. And so if you think about your suitcase, if you've traveled here and you travel sort of heavy like I tend to do, that's probably about the weight of your check-in luggage. And so she goes out 6 days a week, often at night time, because then there is less competition from other recycling collectors, but also it's when it's very dangerous. And when I was interviewing her, there was a moment when she was telling me about how she goes out in all weathers, the intense heat in the summer, the snow in the winter, that I felt that I was being so extractive. I was just asking her all of these questions and just taking all of the information that she was giving me as a researcher, doing my job. And it just struck me in that moment that this was not a good thing to be doing. And then we continued with the interview and we wrapped it up. And at the end, she got up and she came and she hugged me, which in South Korea is quite an unusual thing to do because you don't hug people that you don't know. That sort of personal contact is different. And I was thanking her for her time, but then she thanked me and she said that she really appreciated the time that I had taken to travel from the UK to come and speak to her and ask her questions about her life, her experience of older age, and her work, because what she does is work. And in that moment, what she did was give me an incredible sense of belonging. And we've been talking about the power of reciprocity over the last couple of days. And for me, this was a real example of reciprocity. So that in that interview, that she too had gained something, that she felt that she had been able to tell her story, express herself, and feel that someone wanted to hear what she had to say. And so that has really influenced my understanding of belonging, the power of reciprocity and how important it is.
Wow, I love that. Thank you so much. And last for this question, but not least, Travis, please tell us more.
Great. Hello, everyone. My name is Travis Holmes, and I'm from Special Olympics International, and I work in our space of global volunteer management. Thanks for coming here. I'm from Ottawa, Canada, so our capital of Canada. Hopefully for all of you who is your first time in Canada, you're enjoying it. Toronto's a beautiful city. We have some great weather, and you will come back and visit more of Canada. It's wonderful, and we would love to have you. And thank you for having me. I'm pretty new in this space overall. And I have been learning. I think it was maybe you said on your speak, you left with a lot of thoughts in your head yesterday. I also was in that space last night as well, and so it's been a pleasure to listen and learn from all of you. Today, my perspective is going to be shared from the sport sector, or sport industry, and both from a Canadian perspective as well as the international sport perspective. And specifically, for the last 14 years, I worked in the Paralympic movement with Team Canada, and the last year, almost a year now, I've been working with Special Olympics International, as I just mentioned. I have been working for and with athletes, people with a disability, both physical and intellectual, for a better part of 15 years now. And I say for first, because we do have a saying in sport that we are led by. We are a movement that is led by, is for, and for the needs of our athletes and for the people of our movement. And I just wanted to maybe start first before I get into to answer the question. Is everyone here, or is there anyone here not familiar with the Paralympics or Special Olympics? Awesome. Seems like we've done a good job here with that. That's awesome. So I'll skip that part, which is really, really great to know because I guess in general, like to answer your question around my identity and how it's influenced me, I am a white male. I do not have a disability, relatively well off and such, so a pretty stereotypical white male in our society. And when I think about the question you're asking around like what has made me identify and what has kind of made me most comfortable, is actually been around being around people who are at their most comfort in a space, which is interesting because that means for me to be in that space, I'm possibly the minority there. And I think that's a really important and powerful thing in that space. And it's something that has taught me a lot. And I will tell a very brief story, I guess, around both what I call kind of a magical place of this is sport. And sport for people with disabilities is all about creating spaces that are fully inclusive at their absolute maximum for anybody in the world to be a part of. It doesn't matter. Nothing matters. Everyone is welcome. Everyone is included. And that's really the idea of it. And in the Paralympic Games, we live in a space called the Paralympic Village, or you've probably seen on TV the Olympic Village and all of that. We switched that over to being a Paralympic Village. And in that space, you have about 190 to 205 countries coming together. Living together in what would be similar to like university-style dorms or condo buildings. All of these people are eating together, living together, moving around together, training together, taking transportation together. It doesn't matter what disability they have, if you can see, if you have an intellectual disability, if you have no arms and no legs and your body is on a skateboard. All of that is great. And that is the place of what the Paralympic Games and the Special Olympics is. It offers that space for full inclusivity for everyone. And I think what sport does, and why I say that's kind of helped shape my identity, is because I'll never forget my first time in a village or at a games. And I'm walking by and I see 4 athletes from 4 different countries who speak, I'm assuming 4 different languages, probably some commonality with broken English, but 4 different languages. And so there's an individual who's blind, a person with 1 arm, a person in a wheelchair, and a person with an intellectual disability. And they're playing catch. I stood and watched that for 5 or so minutes. Nobody caught the ball. Nobody threw it really at each other. And the whole entire thing was exactly, when I'm listening to everybody in this movement, that's belonging. It didn't matter that it wasn't an accurate throw. It didn't matter that the person who was blind couldn't see the ball coming. None of that mattered because they were together and they were in that space together. And that is something that's very, very powerful and something that sport brings. And it was something that really shaped for me because when I go into that space, I don't have a disability. And so you're in the space of building trust. You're in the space of working with people. You're in the space of, I've never crossed a finish line. I've never even been at a start line. So who am I? My skill is really, I type very fast. And I'm great at hosting meetings and all of those things. But really from a sport perspective, it's about serving. And so we often, when we are doing anything, we work with the people that we work for. And so we are always working with them to identify what is it that how they want things to work, what is right and what is inclusive, what creates that sense of community and belonging. And then we're there to deliver it and serve it. And so I think that kind of experience in living over in that world for the last 15 years has really shaped my perspective.
Thank you, Travis. I want to get to at least one more question before we open up to the floor. I know we've got 30 minutes left. So I'm going to ask everybody, and I'll go in the same order. What barriers to belonging do you encounter in your community or in your area of work? And so, Dan, I'll turn it to you again.
Yeah, I think something we've been talking a little bit about, particularly last night, was the idea of survival mode. And not to compare anyone's sort of lived experiences, but I think there is a commonality in that concept of survival mode. It's definitely a phrase that I've heard used by my queer peers, particularly those who are not gay, cis white men like me, you know. But for me, the theme of the symposium is around the bridges to belonging, and I think there are clear bridges to me to get to that belonging for my community. For me, it's starting off with education, and then that bridges to understanding, which then bridges to accepting, which then bridges to belonging. But the problem is, there are so many external forces that want to burn those bridges down at different points, and that creates the fragmentation and the lack of education. And the problem is, it's the people in the most power who are doing that. It's our politicians, it's media, and like I said, like, I'm a cis white gay man. I'm like in the penthouse of the condo building of the LGBT community, so I acknowledge my privilege there. But I feel, to quote another gay icon, Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility. So I feel that I and other people like me should absolutely be fighting for the most vulnerable of my community. And then on the other side, the cynic in me would say that whilst I would love for people to go and educate themselves and understand and accept and belong, I believe everyone in here would absolutely do that with their eyes closed, but in the bigger world, that's a harder task. So actually, the cynic in me would say, if you can't find the time to educate yourself, if you can't find the time to understand, then all we ask is for acceptance. You don't need to understand, you don't need to get it, you just need to accept it.
Thank you, Dan. Victoria, do you want to add on to this topic question?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. I've found the people that I feel like I belong to the people that I've met. The volunteers that I meet are very diverse. I mean, obviously there's Mahmoud, who started up the project himself, this particular project. Serve the City has about 40 or 45 different projects currently running, all run by project leaders. But frankly, most of them look like me, apart from Mahmoud. And I think that I had this idea of what I was going to say about this, but I've just had conversations with people. I've just had a conversation with Volunteer Toronto and about how they're approaching volunteering. There was a question when I stood up yesterday, or a remark yesterday from Elena about the nature of volunteering. And I think Serve the City, we have an our ethos is to bring people together to serve each other with humility. But we have such a diverse group of volunteers that come, and they come with their own stories. I have my story, but their story is very different to mine. They're coming at it from a different perspective. And I understood that the way that things work in Canada is that volunteering is almost an obligation for anybody who is coming here. It's a way, it's a way to demonstrate that you are going to be a productive member of society. And I volunteer voluntarily, but I'm not sure that volunteering compulsorily is the way to go. And this has been such an eye-opener for me, the way that people are looking at volunteering, even the word volunteering. Perhaps there needs to be another way of describing it. The Red Cross, who I work with, talk about beneficiaries, and I find that word really problematic, because our ethos is to cross the line, but that line works in both directions. It's not me giving to you, it's you giving to me. And I have received so much more than I've given. And I think anyone who's volunteered for any length of time will always say, whatever you give, you will receive back tenfold. And I think volunteering now needs to be about empowering people to serve their community in the way that works for them. And maybe that's this idea of micro grants. I don't know, I'm not an expert, but I just think I think we need to move forward with volunteering, and I think we need to reframe it.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. And what do you want to share? Can you tell me a bit about barriers that you've experienced in belonging?
So the barriers to belonging that persons with disabilities living in group homes face became all more visible during the COVID-19 pandemic. With the Samuel Center's support, my colleagues and I at HPOD did a study where we interviewed group home residents with intellectual disabilities. One of the things we found was that even though they were living in homes with other people, which to some, during the pandemic especially, might have seemed like a built-in community when we were all struggling with social isolation. The staff of the homes did nothing to try to foster a sense of community. Worse, the barriers to belonging that I experienced while in the group home were only greater for these group home residents. Long after people without disabilities began leaving their home again, group homes were frequently on lockdown. Also, staffing shortages meant that residents had fewer opportunities to do anything outside their four walls.
Yeah, even when they're together, they're alone. Yeah, thank you for saying that. Bridget and then Travis, so I'll turn to you too.
The key barrier to the work that I do, is around ensuring or working towards a world where all older people can live with dignity. Dignity is at the heart of human rights, and I think it's also at the heart of belonging. And the key barrier to that is ageism. And ageism being the way we think, the stereotypes, the way we feel, the prejudices, and the way we behave, so the sort of discrimination towards other older people, towards older age, and also towards ourselves and our own older age. And ageism it's all around us, whether we're aware of it or not. It's something that we self-internalize. We may fear or not wish to get older. We may have we may be afraid of older age. We may try to sort of erase it. We may buy anti-aging creams. I mean, there is a real self-internalization of ageism. It's also around us in our families and our communities. And one way that it's really clearly demonstrated is in the language that we use. And if you stop and think about some of the phrases that we use, terms like working age, which define the ages at which you should work, premature mortality, that to die below a certain age is a premature death, but not if you die older than that. And it's very apparent in some of the compliments that we give each other as well. You know, how often have you said, or has someone said to you, wow, you look good for your age, or you don't look a day over 25, or 60 is the new 40. And all of these things stigmatize the actual age that you are and stigmatize older age. And the ageism is also in the laws and policies that govern how we live our lives, in upper age limits in healthcare treatment and cancer screening, for example, or in mandatory retirement ages that tell us when we have to stop working, regardless of our ability or wish to continue working. And so it's structural and it's systemic, and often we're unaware of it, we may tolerate it, when we may even condone and perpetuate it. And so that, I think, is the biggest barrier to belonging. And so in terms of the work that we do, it's to challenge and to sort of raise awareness around ageism and try to ensure that older people's rights are protected, and that slowly we eradicate ageism.
Yeah, thank you, Bridget.
All right. Sport is an interesting thing. We have a saying, it's called the transformative power of sport. And really what we talk about here is through sport, being able to provide opportunities for individuals to experience sport. And sport is the catalyst, what we call kind of sport for development. So we're driving through sport for people to be able to improve in all kinds of areas and gain experiences and feel part of community and be part of feeling their belonging. And barrier-wise, I think it's fair to say at some point in all of our lives, we have experienced sport. That could be a gym class, it could be a recreational program, could be just out with some friends at a playground, and it could be community level sport, it could be elite level sport. But for some way, shape, and form, we all go through some form of a sport experience. And around that is the sports systems. And when I get to barriers, for something that I see, and I think we see in our sport industry, is that sports systems are built for and by individuals that are fully able-bodied. And I think about school programs, or think about any time you've ever gone anywhere, they're not accessible. And whether that's physical accessibility, sure, but there's other barriers that exist within sport and the overall system. Policies and how they're made, the language that is used around, how we depict or showcase and profile people, how we create safe and welcoming environments for people. All of that is kind of part of our sports system, and very rarely is it made for to be fully inclusive and fully accessible for people, so that all people can enjoy sport, and through sport thrive in their lives and live their best lives. And I think those barriers, there's many others that exist in there, but I guess I'll speak maybe now from a Special Olympics perspective. There's a realization that there are gaps overall especially around like community sport or the sport programming that are offered for individuals to participate in. Often in many countries, those are not created for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And so Special Olympics does a lot of work in that space through volunteers in many cases to reach those community levels, through family members to create those organizations, and to be able to find ways to create opportunities for people to participate in sport, to overcome some of those barriers, to create those safe, welcoming, inclusive environments that everyone feels comfortable, accepted. Those are a couple of terms I'm hearing. That's really what sport's trying to do, and through sport, how we can just continue to empower and create better lives for everyone. So I think a lot of those barriers are somewhat kind of traditional barriers, and I think a lot about like coaching and like how do you learn sport. Sport is taught through a very kind of able-bodied lens, if you will, and being able to have coaching modules and training for how do you work with an individual with a physical disability of whatever type it might be. How do you coach an athlete or work with an athlete who has an intellectual disability, and really being able to break down some of those barriers, creating, putting people with disabilities in leadership positions to allow them to create those policies and facilitate that language and create those best experiences. So sport, I hear a lot of what a lot of people are talking about here, and as I said, I'm pretty new to this space here, and it's interesting because sport does work a lot on what everyone is talking about here, because it is a big part of our processes, I guess. And if I think about my time in elite high performance sport, that's really about performance and medals and such. And so it doesn't matter if you have one arm or two arms. It doesn't, none of that matters where you come from or any of that nature. It's about how can we bring you into the sports system so you can build professionally and personally your growth, but also at the same time be part of that sports system and such. And so I just think there's a lot that goes into barriers around sport, and a lot of people think of them primarily around physical barriers that you can see, which is a thing for sure. It's
Sorry
major,
to stop you,
but
Travis,
there's others.
but we're on the effort of time. I want to open it up to everybody for
All
questions. Thank you. I'm going to collect two. Is there anything on this side of the room? So go, okay, 1, 2, and then you two. I'll collect. So over here, if there's a mic. Yeah, it's coming over.
It's a question, but I'm going to step through it because I think it's, you know how yesterday I was talking about the fact that I didn't get diagnosed until I was 17. The reason why I didn't get diagnosed until I was 17 is because my IQ was too high, my intellectual quotient, way too high, like 2.5 years above the norm. Back then, they didn't have high functioning autism. They do now. The problem, and I'm sorry Travis, sport is a part of this, is we live in a world where it's not enough to get diagnosed, you have to fit a classification. So you have to have an intellectual disability to play sport most of the time. The problem with that is you have to have an IQ below 75. So there's a few problems with that. First of all, it's very, very hard to get diagnosed. Second of all, there's a whole narrative, and I hate to say it, the Paralympics have been driving this ever since the Sydney 2000 Olympics, around people like that are drug cheats. They're the Spanish lawyers. There's a whole documentary on it. That has been very destructive and damaging, and I would argue is a human rights violation. But I'll let that go. The point is you have to fit that. It costs a lot of money to do it. So you have to get diagnosed and then get re-diagnosed and then get reassessed. And then if you don't fit that system, you're out, according to virtually everybody around. Moving past sport, every other system has the same problem. Health, disability services, law, they all have the same problem. You hear it all the time. ADHD is not a condition. Why? Because it fits in 6 different categories. Autistic spectrum is a spectrum. It's probably got like 12 different classifiable touch points. I mean, I work with clients in disability. You read their medical form, mate, there's so many different conditions that they have. Why I'm raising that is these are the sort of things that we've got to start to really address. And I've challenged Special Olympics a lot on that, Travis, around ID. And IDD is not enough as far as I'm concerned. I say to them, well, hang on, you talk about a unified generation. Great, if you're the youth, you can come join. If you have a disability, you've got to jump through 55,000 hoops. And then someone says you're out because someone without a disability did something wrong 25 years ago. So what I'm saying is, how do we really deal with those issues, even if they're uncomfortable and even if they're part of what we do?
Thank you. Over here we have a question. I'm going to collect them and then I'll combine. Over here, where's the mic?
Thank you so much. From me, it's not rather a question, but it's a comment. I have a problem when we get to say that we need to accept people who are different from other people and not really get into the space of understanding. We get to see a lot of performative politics to say that we have included you in certain documents and therefore you are included. What that deviates from is their responsibility to be sensitized and actually educate yourself around people that are different from you. So I always say that we have lipstick documents that actually speak about how to include persons with disabilities, members of the LGBTQIA plus community. But then we have a problem of unfair discrimination that gets to be institutionalized and you don't get to see it. You see it when you see in the hierarchies of different types of organization where you see a domination of whether men or, people, able-bodied people. So there's no diversity, there's no variety of different people from different walks of life. And also, people will run away from the responsibility of being empathetic. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for sharing. Can you pass the mic to Kim? Yeah. And then we'll collect your question and then one more. Yeah. It's coming around.
I think it's on.
Yeah, you're good.
Thank you. I first wanted to recognize Ben Hack for what you were talking about regarding Special Olympics, and wanted to add to that for Travis and for everyone that I've had the honor of serving with 3 people in this room, Bill Alford, Ben Hack, Matthew Williams, all on the Special Olympics International Board. And in fact, the first organization I got involved with back not long after my father had a brain injury and coma was with Special Olympics, because I went to Tim Shriver as a friend and just asked for help and advice. And he first suggested, would your family maybe like to get involved with the equestrian program, because we're horse lovers in my family. And I said, no, we want to get there to support families. And Ben, what you were talking about is really important. And for Travis, I know you're newer to Special Olympics, so this allows me to just reinforce something for the whole room, is that the creed of Special Olympics is nothing about us without us. It's competitive. No one is going to be happy throwing a ball that never is caught or never lands. And I think that you didn't intend to, but for the athletes that I've met in this room and everywhere I go, they're my role models for grit and for being competitive. And also, not everyone can win a race. So when you lose a race, you can still do that with some grace and support your teammates. So everything I've learned about sportsmanship in life, never having been recognized even as a poor athlete myself, has come from Special Olympics. And this carries right through to something that I wanted to stress in a parallel point with Bill and colleagues from the Harvard Project on Disability, beginning with you, Anne, who has the lived experience, which is more valuable as to what it's really like. And again, I've learned so much from you about grit and standing up and fighting and telling me and others what is wrong with the so-called care system or community living, where people have been, there's nothing worse than institutionalization. But after that, care, community. I remember you telling me when I got to come and visit you at Harvard, where you work, that living in community can end up being in a situation where the people that you want to get to know, others in community, there's no bridges to belonging, so you don't get to know each other, and you still need permission to walk out the front door. So I just want to give a big shout out to all the advocates in this room in all your different disciplines, and to ask this question to the panel. And Elsie, I'd like to open that you could answer a question too.
Thanks, sure.
Because I know your story, which is incredible, which is when we talk about kind of, or you hear it a bit out and about, this kind of baseline aspiration, like it's enough to just be in the room. That is not true inclusion. We know that on the panel, right, guys? So how much of what's wrong, to me, is not about the self-advocacy or people like me and Bill and others that we're there to be of service, but we also want to bring our might and to stand up for the people who really are the leaders in the space. How much is what's wrong to do more with the perception more than the reality? And this is something that I got as an idea many years ago. I don't see my brother in the room, but to say, oh, hi, our dad, our father. I got to think about it when he experienced ageism, 65 years old, and told insurance telling us not $1 for disability, sundown years. And he had acquired a lot of disabilities, and we kept seeing that the changes, we saw the changes in him, that was plain enough to see, but his heart, his determination, his character never changed. It was the way that he was perceived by others that was the problem, not the disabilities, the way he was perceived because of the disabilities, not age, but the way age was perceived. I see it with my colleagues from Oxford Poverty Human Development Institute. It's not about poverty in its many dimensions. It's about the way people are perceived and therefore treated. And we go to migrants, we go to race, we go to LGBTIQ+, and all of this to me is where the emphasis needs to be, that the center of the circle is not something out there, and it's our job, I like the word of service leadership, and to get behind the advocates, and that's why we see changes in design. That's why we see Michael Stein, our colleague from HPOD, who is one of the people leading the way with disabilities, advocating on behalf of people with disabilities to be right in the dialogue around adaptation to climate change. Who knows better? It's also to the design of playgrounds and most everything that we do. So it is happening. I just want to ask, what role does perception still play as an obstacle? Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. So, being cognizant of the fact that we only have 6 minutes, those two whose questions I missed, we will gather at the end of the stage and you can talk to us after we wrap. I'm sorry. Do I have any takers for the 2 questions we had from Ben and then from Kim?
I really wanted to answer Kim's question because I have an experience I work with. It's a small experience, but I'll give you an idea. So I have this. I've started this project, which is visiting people, older people, so they have physical disabilities that come with age, but they were born with intellectual disabilities. So they have like this dual kind of problem with perception. And what I've noticed is that when I have volunteers coming, I have to really work very, very hard to say to the volunteers, please don't talk to people like children. They are adults. They've led full lives. They've been in the Special Olympics. They've won medals. They've worked. They fall in love. You know, there are people who they kind of, you know, people will say, oh, this is my girlfriend. And, you know, and I think that there is this tendency, and I think the problem is when you shut people away, people with disabilities away, the wider public don't don't understand. It's fear. This is why people behave the way they behave towards people with disabilities. My aunt she founded a charity. She actually was awarded the OBE, which is the Order of the British Empire, for the charity she started. But she had multiple sclerosis. Her charity had nothing to do with her disability. But she was still treated. People used to talk to the person pushing her in the wheelchair, not to her. She was one of the, she graduated from the LSE. This was an intelligent woman. And I think we've still got a really, really long way to go. And I guess through my volunteering, I hope that, you know, we can kind of start opening up the wider public to people with disabilities and just normalize it. That's my answer.
Thank you, Victoria. I mean, I think perception and attitudes overlap a lot. Anne, or did you want to contribute?
So, in our latest study, we did a study on the individual service plan that people served by the Department of Developmental Services have. We found a lot of similarities to our other studies, but people are supposed to have the right to make their own service plan with their and to speak up. In reality, a lot of people think that they're in control of their plan. A lot of individuals think they're in control of their plan. In reality, it's really the service coordinator and their loved ones, their family members and professionals that are in control of this. And they kind of just think that because they speak up, they're in control of this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the decisions are being made, and it's kind of they're just following the goals that are made for them.
Mm-hmm. And it's perceptions about them that are stopping people from being able to see that they can lead their own plans.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Anne. Do you have a bit more?
I could imagine.
Yeah.
I could imagine that someday the services could be these. The services for people like me are really failing us, mm-hmm. because I don't need, and many other people don't need that much support, and what the support that we're given is supposed to be okayed by the system. Mm-hmm. The person-centered services aren't really that effective because it doesn't really help people become that independent.
Yeah.
It just helps them follow certain goals, and most of the time the goals aren't the person's goals. It's the service coordinator's goals or the family's goals for the person. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they get a little bit of what they want. Sometimes they're heard a little bit. Mm-hmm. Many people have told us that their goals aren't in their plan. Mm-hmm. So, as much as you you try to get people to speak up, when they look at their plan, it's not in an accessible format. Mm-hmm. It comes late. Some people say that it hasn't come at all, but that could be because it doesn't come to them. It comes to either their group home or their guardian.
Mm-hmm.
Those are barriers.
Yeah, yes. And they tie into the perceptions. Thank you, Anne.